Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us today at our weekly news update. I pray that you are blessed today, and I pray that you are continuing steadfast in the faith, despite what you might see out there in the world. Welcome to everyone who is joining us here. If you're joining us for the first time, we welcome you. We certainly encourage you to share the link, to subscribe to the channel. And we like to do these once a week. We started to do this a while back as people began to, we started to get comments basically about the fact that people were disconnecting from the news because it was a bit overwhelming and a lot of propaganda and a lot of noise. And honestly, can't really debate that. But I'm thankful that we continue to stay connected enough to where we can understand some of the things that are changing in our world. We can certainly see the answer to prayers. We can see prophecy being fulfilled in the earth. And so we use, we take advantage of these moments. And frankly, we have one right now where we can watch the things that are unfolding in the earth. And so thank you all who are subscribed. And if you're not subscribed already, please do. Around here, we like to say we want to be informed without being overwhelmed. And that's a really good state of mind to stay in. You want to know about things that are going on. You're aware of it. So you're not hit with the shock value, which, frankly, a lot of what you see out there seems to be built with that intention, doesn't it? Seems to be that they really want to hit you with some shock value and cause you to sort of lose your orientation. And the more you study the way in which these people think, the more you understand that this affects everything. And so this is part of their machinations, which they like to utilize in order to move the people the way that they want to move them. And so this is why we take that step back, that 10,000 foot view, as I like to say, and try to not get too attached. Again, be informed without being overwhelmed. And if you're again new here, then let me introduce you to Remnant Watch, is where we keep track of all of these things, and we put these up as a ready reference for everyone who would like to keep track of the things that we're talking about week to week. And this gives us an excellent way of doing that. And so these are the stories that you'll find that not only we covered this week, but weeks up to this point. And so those that are catching up, those that are keeping track, or maybe catching up from the summer and sort of going back and doing some picking up, because there is a theme that we start to discern as we watch, and we start to pick up the play, if you will. We start to see behind the scenes a bit. You can almost get to the point where you're anticipating certain things, and there it is, and just as we thought they were going to do, here they're doing this or that. And so my hope for all of you is that your discernment will be sharper. The notes and comments and encouragements that we're receiving, and thank you for that, by the way, seem to elucidate that point, and seem to indicate that people are, in fact, finding the discussions, and if nothing else, the analyses, worthwhile and encouraging in their walk as they see these things in light of Bible prophecy and understand the moment in which we're in. And I do believe we're in a very, very epic moment in history. And I want to say that to you before we go further tonight, is that you are living in an epic, epic time. And I hope you are taking pictures. I hope you are making memorials. And I mean that sincerely. I hope that you are really recording some of the amazing things that you're not only witnessing worldwide, but witnessing in your own lives, and some of the answers to prayer and amazing things that you're witnessing. Record these things for future generations, because if there's one thing we're learning, is that it is the doom of man that they forget. Man who does not learn history is doomed to repeat it. And so we have to be better at recording things and looking back in history. One thing we're all learning is what survives over centuries and what gets wiped out in fires and floods. It's kind of interesting. These big bad kingdoms that used to rule the world, we're digging them up with excavation equipment. Just saying. So that puts things in perspective if you're a student of history. In tonight's lead story, we've been talking a lot about war and conflict. And how many know that war takes on multiple fronts and it manifests in multiple ways? And this is one of the things that we need to understand about this multidimensional conflict that we find ourselves in. We need to have enough sense to understand that it's not all bullets and bombs. And in fact, most of that is theatrics. What it really is about is the love of mammon, which is the root of all evil. And so this is where you're going to find a lot of warfare. And so tonight's top story, again, like I said, you might not have um, thought of this as a lead story considering everything else that's going on. But those of you that are good students, that are sharp, that have been walking along with us, know that this has been a parallel story that's been hitting very hard at the statue, the Babylonian statues getting hit with a brick. Okay, it's getting hit with a brick. And this lead story tonight that France could join BRICS. Well, if you don't understand the enormity of that, then you do need some geopolitical training, because France is a major part of the European Union, if you will. And if they go BRICS, there goes the Union, in my opinion. I think this is a very, very strong indicator that the tide is turning to the east. And France could join the BRICS. At the St. Petersburg Forum, the grandson of General Charles de Gaulle raised the possibility of France joining the BRICS. In response, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that if France presented its candidacy, he would consider it. So this was them indicating to France that if you make this decision and decide, hey, maybe joining these guys isn't such a bad idea, we're letting you know that we would look at that favorably. What do you think that does to the psyche of the Western alliances when key players like France is a key player? This is a big deal to see this news coming out. And so again, remember that a government can only rule a population that authenticate that government. So if the population believes something completely different, it's very difficult for a government to oversteer that, especially in an age with hyper communication. Even nations that are known for authoritarian governmental actions are having to deal with the reality of exposure of light coming from everywhere. It's a different era. There's cameras all the time. So their own systems are now working against them. And this is changing the atmosphere. And so you're seeing a shift here that I believe is monumental. And it's monumental for multiple reasons. It's not only an economic shift, but it's a shift of thinking. It indicates their confidence in the future. This is an entire nation saying, I think things aren't going to go well over here, and we might want to couple in over here. It's an interesting thought process, don't you think, considering the various axes that are manifesting in this hour? So once again, wars and rumors of wars, and this is a different type of war. And believe me, economic war is devastating. Any of you ever had economic warfare waged against you, where accounts are closed or opportunities are seized, or you're not able to take advantage of certain things because certain invisible blocks are in the way? Okay. These are things that are reality, and this is part of our world. So I believe that a lot of these invisible hands and these elements that have been in control are losing their grip. And I believe that that is a good thing overall for mankind. So rejoice in the light that is shining, because I believe it's loosening the grip of hegemony that, frankly, has for many people been slavery. And in fact, India and Egypt, and this is again one of the things that we've been watching, right? So this is sort of friendly fire. Watch this now, folks, because in Egypt and India, they're ditching the US dollar for trade. So what does this do? Once again, we've been talking about this. This is essentially why there's no more Gaddafi. Okay. You understand that this was a very, very big deal. Entire governments were shaken up for these reasons right here that you're seeing on your screen. This used to be a death sentence to announce such a thing. And in the latest adherence to the BRICS de-dollarization efforts, India and Egypt have held discussions in attempts to ditch the US dollar within their trade relations. Indeed, Egypt was one of 6 nations invited to join the bloc at its 2023 annual summit. Now its trade with the original BRICS member is set to be settled in local currencies. Now, this strengthens those local currencies, which are now backed by whatever commodities they're trading. But what does that do to the third party dollar sitting over here on the side? It becomes of no value. It is now not needed in this transaction. It was needed before, not needed now. Do you see the difference? And that difference is going to manifest in your world. It's going to manifest in ways that are going to affect your buying power. It's going to affect international buying power. This is going to affect inventories in the United States because of the reduction of buying power the United States enjoyed, and it's a net importer of goods, as we've talked about. So you can't help but realize, folks, that this is going to be disastrous for the Babylonian system that was. And we warned them. So it isn't like they weren't warned. They could have honored, they could have been respectful, they could have been a blessing to the people. As the scripture says, we would have healed Babylon, but Babylon would not. And so now Babylon is destroyed. And good riddance. So this is what you're going to see. You're going to see a collapse of these things. It's been in the works for several years now. And those of you that have eyes to see and ears to hear know exactly when their thing started to come apart. And now Germany, in response to this, so Germany trying to sort of contain this dumpster fire, for lack of a better term. I don't even know what to call this. Germany is launching the digital euro to counter the BRICS currency, right? Is that what? And they're asking the question because, of course, Germany is allied closely with the United States. The BRICS alliance is looking to launch a new currency to challenge the U.S. dollar. Doesn't need to. Did you just not notice they settled their transactions in local currencies? The BRICS currency could be a head fake. So there's that. Their challenge to the U.S. dollar and the euro and the global currency market. Sergei Glaviev, Russia's former advisor to the president, confirmed earlier this month that BRICS currency is almost ready for launch. And once again, that's almost becoming a non-starter, a non-event, because if these countries are able to settle with each other through their own local currencies, not only do they strengthen their own local currencies, which that's where their real wealth is, but they also open up opportunities for developing wealth in other countries that is also going to be protected in the same way. There are a lot of positives on this side of the ledger that are not there for this. And what is the response? The response is, hey, we're going to give you a hyper centralized control surveillance tool that we call or pretend it's a monetary unit. Here you go. That's our answer. That's our response, is another form of a fiat make-believe thing where these folks are trying to simply denominate the trading of oil and raw materials and goods and so forth, you can already see where this is going, folks. And the smart money's figuring this out. So I'm just encouraging you to, I'm not a financial advisor, but I'm certainly not going to put my head in the sand when I can see which way it's going. Okay. And so again, it all is a matter of what you can get for it, what it trades for. So a currency is great until it isn't. There's been many examples through the centuries or through even the recent century where, you've seen countries go from one valuation down to a whole different level, and it happens almost overnight. And that's why I believe they're not getting the response on the international stage to their newest treasury offerings than they normally do. And as a matter of fact, there's a big fire sale going on, and the attitude in China is that U.S. government debt is a disaster waiting to happen. And so they're saying the quiet part out loud, and they're not afraid to declare that right to the faces of U.S. government officials. Moody's lowered its assessment of the United States credit outlook from stable to negative on Friday, citing the country's large fiscal deficits and a decline in debt affordability. Although it maintained the country's AAA rating, it warned its statement that in the context of higher interest rates, without effectual fiscal policy measures to reduce government spending or increase revenues, the U.S. fiscal deficits will remain very large, significantly weakening debt affordability. So just because you can pass a bill saying we want to borrow more money doesn't mean that's a good idea. And since when can you not run the government on $4 trillion, which is what you did take in? So why is it that when it was 1 trillion came in, they had to spend 2 trillion? When 2 trillion came in, they had to spend 3 trillion. When 3 trillion comes in, they've got to spend 5 trillion. Why is this? Why can't they figure that out, right? And that's the grand old question of government. Good luck with that one. That's been the big ruse that's been going on since probably since somebody first came up with a concept of government, right? And as a result, you end up with genius moves like this one. Here we go. Biden hands China a big win with military deal, experts say. Incredibly poor decision. A deal could limit use of AI in nuclear weapons and drones. President Biden is set to strike a deal with China that would limit the use of artificial intelligence in nuclear weapons. Biden is to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Wednesday as the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation APEC Summit in San Francisco. And this, of course, already occurred, but, we're just catching up. And the two leaders are expected to also sign an agreement to limit AI's use in military applications, according to a report from Business Insider, because, when people go to war, they always keep their agreements. Like that's some of this stuff is really laughable, but it is what they are admitting. So at least they're admitting that there are AIs that affect weaponry. How about that? So they just told you that indirectly because they're signing an agreement saying, well, we're just not going to do that because that would just be over the line. That'd just be too much. And of course, if you haven't been picking up the underbelly of all of this, is that they're trying desperately to get China to participate in buying some of that debt that they're trying to pass rules about being able to offer, right? So they pass the new debt and they say, yes, we can now raise this much money. Now they need to go out and sell that debt to countries with enough money to buy some of that. I mean, it's nice to have a few institutional investors, but let's be honest, they're not doing so well. Regardless of what anybody says, the financial markets are struggling. And so they're all hoping that a lot of them were hoping that China would just come along and play ball. So what I saw was sort of all hands on deck. Everybody call China your buddy. Right. So this is what's been going on. And I've been just sort of sitting back watching this. Apple, BlackRock, Pfizer, the gang. Their CEOs are fawning over China's communist ruler Xi Jinping as he comes to California, and they gave him this big standing ovation. And I don't know if you guys caught any of this, but the streets were literally lined with Chinese flags. It was as if, we were in a different country. And there was some serious, serious backlash to this, folks. That did not play well. That might have seemed really cool at the time. It's one of those ideas that, look good on a drawing board until somebody put it on a video and shared it across the country. Okay. Because just like that, they had a reaction. In fact, Newsweek had a story that the video of Chinese flags filling San Francisco street, that's exactly what happened. It was a backlash. Here we go. I'll put that on the screen. This is a Newsweek article. Video of Chinese flags filling San Francisco streets sparks a backlash. What a shock. Okay. And so here, let me pause that. Ahead of President Joe Biden's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in San Francisco on Wednesday, videos of Chinese flags parading in the streets are sparking backlash. Xi and Biden are set to have their first face-to-face meeting in a year on Wednesday during their Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum. And so, they were putting out the writs, man. Hey, you feel comfortable, buddy? Come on in here, man. Bring your checkbook. Come on down, man. We're friends now. Come on, we're practically we're practically buds, right? Didn't work. The Chinese officials have made it pretty clear that they're not interested. In fact, they're liquidating their holdings in the West. They're going all in on BRICS. They're going in on the solution of what they believe is the solution to an economic massive problem in the world. And there's a lot of people that agree with them. There's a lot of nations that are agreeing with them, including France, apparently, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that, folks. The reason for this is the information that comes out. Look, we might have controlled information. This is why we get news from all over the earth, because in certain parts you might not hear about certain stories. Okay. And you want to know why wallets are drying up all over the earth for the Eastern European theater of war? Maybe this might be a reason why, because reports like this are coming out that are indicating that there's been some serious embezzlement. Now, I don't know if this is true. You don't know if this is true, but they're standing on these reports saying 20 to 36% of all Western financial aid has been embezzled. Corrupt scandals at various sectors of the economy and state governance are regular occurrence in Ukraine. And so this is what's being reported. Now, they can dispute or try and debunk it, but in order to do that, they're going to have to investigate. And I'm afraid that's probably something they don't want them to do. And there's been there have been 20 to 36% of all financial aid provided to Kiev by the West has been misappropriated by Ukrainian officials. The Russian Foreign Ministry official spokeswoman Maria Zakharova, Okay, sorry about that. I hate butchering people's names. Nobody likes that. And based on our information, between 20 and 36% of all financial aid from the West was misappropriated by Ukrainian officials. I don't think they're the only ones that had their hands in that particular cookie jar, if you know what I mean. And so I think that story is bound to get more light than less. And we're going to find out that was a lot of things like that were going on. And folks, this is what is destroying the underpinnings of a crooked system based in crooked principles. When you reward crooked behavior, when people get rich doing crooked things, they get used to doing crooked things. And so when light comes in and shuts it down, it's going to seem like, oh no, everything stopped. Well, yeah, because it was all being funded through, nefarious means. So all of that which is connected to that behavior that's now being exposed is going to get exposed in and of itself. In other words, it's funding. Like, what if some businesses were just basically fronts for other kinds of activity? Won't they be affected if law enforcement starts to crack down, for example? Of course. So this is what you're also going to see in the economy. When they were in 2018, President Trump signed an executive order seizing assets of anyone involved in child trafficking, and you saw Bitcoin and other forms of money skyrocket right after that because people were trying to hide their assets. And so don't think that these efforts, especially with regard to law enforcement or military actions or international courts, there's all kinds of things that are happening that are affecting these things. And so realize that that is going to then affect the economy because they're all connected. And we gave away way too much power, and we're finding that out as things start to slowly collapse around us. Massive layoffs will soon begin for a top American bank. In spite of what you might hear from, the current administration, the state of the economy is not great. The big banks in the United States are quite vulnerable in these economic times. And this is them selling you the story that, hey, things are going to get rough. No, what it really boils down to is all kinds of activity that used to fund these operations is being shut down. It's no longer being allowed, folks. And as a result, they're having to pay their bills like the old-fashioned way, and it isn't working out. Citigroup is one of the largest banking institutions in the entire country, and it's about to the rumors on the street is that they're about to wipe a chunk of their workforce as they try to hold on. And one of the things that you're watching mentally here is that on the way up, and anybody that's had this experience knows what I'm talking about. On the way up, you feel invincible, and expenses seem like nothing, and everything seems great. And you learn to live your life at a certain plateau. And when there's an economic downturn, one of the biggest problems people have who experience some type of wealth or get ahead a little bit is they don't adjust to a downturn fast enough. They try to hold on to the old lifestyle or the previous era. Like, they stay too long at the party, if you know what I mean. They don't recognize it as just a time period. And hey, if you just go through the downturn, wisely, you'll come up the other side. Nope. They try to hang on to the previous up time too long. And as a result, when they finally do deal with reality, it becomes a crash. It's a kind of a self-inflicted wound, if you will, because they didn't plan properly. We're heading into this major dip. It's not it's not like there've never been dips before. We've done this before, folks. But you have to prepare for that. You've got to anticipate it. And what you're watching is a lot of businesses, industry, they were betting on long shots, and those long shots didn't happen. And now the bill's coming home, and they're having those board meetings, the kind, where they're going, well, Bob, we gave it the old college try. We're going to have to let the troops know now, because they're the last ones to know about the change that's about to happen. And they're the last ones to know that they're going to have to be letting go 30% of this workforce, and how that's going to affect the local economy, because all of that payroll is now not going out into the local economy. So this has shut down entire towns. Just one company could destroy entire towns. There's rumblings that Walmart may be experiencing serious economic downturn. What would that do after Walmart single-handedly wiped out so many competitors all over the West, especially the United States anyway? And what if they suddenly start having where are people going to then go for their resources? So you can see why putting too much trust into these mechanisms managed by those who have zero love whatsoever for you and your family was not really wise at all. Not even a little bit. It was frankly quite foolish now that we look at it. Okay. And on the other side of the world, they're looking at us through a different lens. And I saw one graphic where, Russia is coming out of a year where it had sanctions like crazy, and they're coming out with a $75 billion surplus. And the United States, king of the sanctions, is coming out with a $2.3 trillion deficit and more debt than ever before. So, which, um, the worst, the worst salesman of the Western nation program is the Western nations. Their own failure and their own open, abject failure systems is their own demise, and it's obvious for those to see. And attempts to manipulate geopolitical things is also being exposed at a rapid rate. You're not getting away with things for as long as they used to. Russia says West's position on Israeli actions in Gaza is going beyond morality and law. Indiscriminate strikes on Gaza's dense urban areas led to massive civilian casualties and destruction, and says foreign ministry. And again, we do not like taking sides in these types of left-right things because that's exactly what they want us to do. And we're just not interested in that. We're on the side of life and preserving life. Russia on Wednesday said the West's position on Israeli actions on the Gaza Strip is going beyond morality and law because both are violated. We consider the position of the West is going beyond morality and law because both are being violated. There can be no doubt double morality, no double interpretation of the same legislative and international legal norms. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said in response to a question by Anna Dalu at news conference in Moscow. The spokeswoman emphasized that when juggling with standards begins, it is all immoral because it's not accidental, it's a strategy. And boy, we've all dealt with that, haven't we? When, there's a double standard. There's rules for me and rules for thee, that kind of thing going on. That's a good point. And if that is in fact happening, it should back up a bit. We don't know the details. There's so much manipulation that we're seeing uncovered. This is the part where I say to the saints, take a step back, because there are now reports coming out of video manipulation all across the board here, like across the spectrum. And so this is where I love the power of sort of the collective mind of people that are watching events, because you get scrutiny that you didn't have before. And it doesn't take years. It takes days. Sometimes an event happens and they have to scrub the video because everybody started to pick it apart and started to find where they edited it or played with it or did things right. This is a good thing. This is light doing what light should do, catching them in craftiness and in manipulation. And we've all seen it. So that's why these events that are transpiring, we have to understand what's really happening and why they're happening. Because again, this is all part of the theatrics. Take a look at this. We just saw this occur. The Yemen's Houthis are hijacking Israeli-linked ship in Red Sea, and they take 25 crew members hostage. I mean, this has not got a good ending written on it, right? So this is probably going to end badly. Israeli officials insisted the ship was a British-owned and Japanese-operated. However, ownership details in the public shipping database associated the ship's owners with Ray Car Carriers, which is founded by Abraham Rami Ungar and is known as one of the richest men in Israel. And so what is now sort of being indicated is that if you are part of the Israeli regime and part of the Israeli, the nation of Israel, then your assets, your businesses, they're going to be targeted. Yemen's Houthi rebels seized an Israeli-linked cargo ship in a crucial Red Sea shipping route Sunday and took its 25 crew members hostage. So, as I said, wars take on various forms and shapes. It's not all the straight, conventional, direct line things. And there are various ways in which decisions are made and pressures are applied. And so we are wise to take a step back and watch as we see these things are unfolding, right before our very eyes. And again, how many know that there's other forms of weaponry, right? There's all kinds of things we can suddenly see manifesting in our world. Take a look at this. Heavy rains hit part of the UAE with more forecasted this week. So they're not even done. Heavy rain hits the areas of Dubai and other parts of the UAE on Sunday with forecast warning. More could be expected throughout the week. So they're not done with the rain that they're already getting. The National Center of Meteorology reported downpours across the country starting just after midnight. And are right in the middle of town. Look at that. That's amazing, right? In Abu Dhabi, police urge motorists to exercise caution due to the rainy weather and advise people to adhere to speed limits.
In the United Arab
And don't drive
Roads
too
in
fast.
Dubai became saturated and
Stick
flooded.
to the speed limit. The center
People are
also
warned
urged
to
people
avoid
to stay away
beaches
from
and stay
areas
indoors during
prone to
floods,
flooding.
while
You
transport
think
and aviation
you might want to
activities
stay
are
away
also
from
disrupted.
areas prone to
People in
flooding
Dubai took to
at
social
this
media to
time?
post
And
videos
who
of the
knew
heavy rain.
that Dubai was prone to flooding? Did you guys know that? Was there some signage that said prone to flooding? Watch out, this desert
As the
area is
UAE
prone to
received heavy
flooding.
rainfall on
Footage
Friday
of heavy
morning,
rain across
Dubai
UAE was
police
also
warned
posted
motorists
on
to
the
take the
Storm Center,
necessary
and one
precautions
clip
if their
showed motorists
vehicles were
driving through
damaged as a
heavy
result of the
rains, while
rain.
another showed
Police
torrential
highlighted the
downpours.
necessity
Well,
of fully
we're
protecting
watching absolute, actual, pure flooding. I took a compilation here and showed the actual footage, and some of these news reports is a perfect example of downplaying the actual event and how serious this flooding actually is. When you see the actual footage versus reading the article, you wouldn't think it was this bad. And then you see it for yourself going, whoa, how would you like to be there trying to deal with this? This is catastrophic levels of flooding. This is going to be a long time in recovery. Even if all this water disappeared tomorrow, okay, tomorrow morning, all the water's gone. Let's just pretend for a minute that that's the case. And I know that there is a big cleanup in aisle 5, in aisle Dubai. That is, you're going to be there a while with a mop, okay? There's going to be a few people getting paid big bucks. Tell him my brother David, he did water reclamation. Let me tell you, that's an insurance guy's worst nightmare. He's got to go write a bunch of checks, and the guys cleaning up, man, they clean up because you got to pay for all that. And then you got all the construction repairs and damage to foundations. And I mean, this is not a small thing. Even if the water, like I said, disappeared tomorrow, every flooded area that you've seen, and we saw Greece, we saw Spain, we saw Turkey. So this year we've seen a lot of, and of course we've seen it throughout the United States in several spots. So we've seen a lot of flooding. Dominican Republic, that's right. Thank you, Abby, for pointing that out. Good point tonight. Thank you for that contribution. I didn't even know that. Dominican Republic is experiencing horrific flooding. Thank you for sharing that. And so again, you got to kind of wonder, because there are those that are really promoting a narrative. One must wonder, one like me might wonder out loud amongst one's friends, if perhaps there is something afoot here. One might wonder such things aloud amongst his friends. Couldn't one? What say you? Right? I mean, I think it's a reasonable thing to go, that's kind of coincidental and interesting. And again, there's those that would say, well, see, we told you. And then we find out that there are things that make these things happen. So there's that. So we're not sure where we are with some of this information, but we do know this: rain is falling, flooding is happening, people's lives are being displaced, businesses are being shut down, homes are being destroyed, families are being completely, I mean, their life savings annihilated. Things are these are real life things, regardless of what you say caused it. Somebody says it was this or that, it doesn't matter. Bottom line is it's wet. That water's real. How it got there doesn't matter anymore now. Now the flooding has occurred. And yeah, we don't know. We don't really know. We think we know. We act like we know, but we don't know because we have to sort through all of these stories. How many of you were convinced that the United States, boom, 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 like every time I say that, there should be music. It should be, heavy, bassy, very regal, don, 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 right? Or like some music background, dun, 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 really dramatic because, hey, we're talking about the United States. And how many of you thought, man, they are armed to the teeth? Their weapons, they got weapons. They got so many weapons. They got missiles on top of missiles. Their missiles have missiles. Right? That's what we all thought. I mean, especially veterans. We're like, man, they're armed and they can blow up the world 58 times and 28 times and all this other nonsense, right? Well, recently there was this audit and a lot of information is starting to come out as a result of this, which is really interesting. So take a look at this, guys. U.S. Air Force Secretary warns that development of urgently needed ICBMs struggling program collapse is possible. These are intercontinental ballistic missiles, which I think they're running out of people that know how to run them because they were built like 2 generations ago. On November 14, Secretary of the U.S. Air Force Frank Kendall revealed that development of a new generation of intercontinental range ballistic missiles under LGM-35A Sentinel program was struggling, highlighting that the program was one of the biggest and most complex that had ever undertaken. He contrasted this with the development of the B-21 Raider stealth bomber, which made its first flight November 10th, stating it was a fairly optimistic comparable to the B-21. Sentinel, I think, quite honestly, this is struggling a little bit. And so, again, what you're going to hear if you dig a little deeper here is they have serious problems putting these things to the field. And the Minuteman III is the oldest class of ICBM in service worldwide by a margin of decades. And there are unknowns of unknowns that are surfacing that are affecting the Sentinel program. It's been a very long time since we did an ICBM. Uh-oh. Sounds like we did a lot of talking because we knew nobody was going to make anybody push any buttons. And now that they want to push a button or two, I think they're finding out some of these buttons don't work. Okay, don't feel bad. They're not the only country finding that out. I just saw a report today where Chinese trains are crashing everywhere. And we don't hear about that. You don't hear about the derailing trains in China. All we hear about them is they're zipping through and these trains are awesome and great. We don't hear about the derailments and all of that because the technology has serious issues and shoddy workmanship. And you've got decades of degrading quality. You've also got maintenance that may or may not have been done while people are busy spending the money. Okay, are they actually doing the work? I remember when we had that hurricane come through Alabama a few years ago, and then we all started wondering, hey, where are the airplanes that were supposed to be at this base? And the wreckage was only of like a certain number, and they were looking for the rest, and that story just sort of disappeared. And so this is starting to, these little hints have been coming for years that things are not quite what we thought they were. And then on top of that, so not only might these things not even work, like they may have just been one big ruse just to sort of fake out our enemies, right? I mean, that's really possible. We don't know. We've never pushed the button. So how do we know if they even work, right? We don't know. But here's the thing. That doesn't mean they aren't dangerous. Okay. That doesn't mean they aren't full of things that could damage the environment or people or who knows, right? So, 300 million Americans could die from radiation should adversaries attack the United States missile silos. So not only might they not work, but they could represent an existential threat to the residents of the United States, which is kind of sad when you think about that. So a new report by researchers from Princeton University's program on science and global security warned that 300 million people could die. Are you hearing this, folks? This was in a Princeton University program, Science and Global Security Report, which warned that 300 million people could die from radiation exposure in the United States within days following a nuclear attack. The paper, which modeled the possible effects of such a catastrophic incident and was published in Scientific American on Wednesday, estimated that in the first 4 days after the country's 450 intercontinental ballistic missile launch facilities were struck, between 340,000 and 4.6 million people would die. Though the average death toll would be 1.4 million, they predicted that 300 million would be at risk of a fatal dose of fallout. And folks, this is without these going off. This is just them being bombed. So like they can't get them to shoot, right? So they're trying to push the button, and the bomb's not going off. The intercontinental ballistic missile is not intercontinentally ballisticling. It's not ballisticing. Nobody changed the gas in this thing since 78. I don't know, right? Blows up, and guess what? Everybody now it becomes a detrimental thing. And yes, we all understand that Elohim can protect you, but remember, we don't throw ourselves off of cliffs, right? Okay, so we have to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And so I think that's why you're going to see, as I think they're all kind of figuring out, wait a minute, maybe our equipment doesn't work quite as snazzy as we thought it did, right? Maybe we should come up with a different plan. So interestingly enough, we start to see a change of posture happening in the war theater. U.S. is close to a deal with Hamas, and it's a bit optimistic at this point, but this may not actually come to pass. We don't know. We'll believe it when we see it. But it's interesting that this is placed in the news as almost like a card to play. So this is put there, and if they decide to go this way, then they can go this way and shut this whole theater thing down and close it up and try to make it look better than it does right now, because I think there's a lot of eyes and a lot of questions that are being asked and a lot of people taking video apart. Okay, Israel and Hamas are close to agreement on a U.S. brokered deal that could free dozens of women and children held hostage in Gaza, which is a very good thing. Hallelujah, that's good news. In exchange for a 5-day pause in fighting, and say people familiar with the emerging terms and the release, which could begin within the next several days, barring last-minute hitches, could lead to the first sustained pause in the conflict. So this is a good thing. This indicates that cooler heads are prevailing. And that's wonderful. That is exactly what we hope for. That's what we want to see in all conflicts, is for cooler heads to prevail. After all, that's where we're headed, folks. We're going toward beating our swords into plowshares. And I think the level of war fatigue is quite high. And people are dealing with, issues in their own world or in their own nations, right? You saw Egypt and Brazil, or Egypt and India doing transactions. Look, they're trying to solve problems. They're trying to take care of their people. Every country's got their own priorities, and they're done playing the we're all one global family village thing, because that fell apart, and they saw it and they started to play a little differently. And it's making more sense to keep their autonomy, to restore the nation's autonomy. It's making more sense to them. That's just reality. Whether you agree with that or not, that's making more sense. Now, the result is that it's causing catastrophic damage to the model, the sort of Babylonian model that is in the West. And one of the areas that you're seeing this manifest is in commercial property. This is one of the indicators that I've been watching for a while, and commercial property is getting slammed, okay, because people are getting more and more remote in their work. They're thinking differently than they've ever thought before. Office landlords can't get a loan anymore. Owners are scrambling to pay back lenders, throwing in more cash, or facing default and losing. This is behind a paywall. But the office sector is seriously being impacted by the changes going on in the economy. And it's not just the economy, it's also the way that people think. Um, the way that people are functioning is very different, and we grew up with a different work ethic. And I think those of you that are, in my generation or older generations, you've already even seen it from one generation to the other. And in fact, this was on Fox News, which I think is a reflection of the battle they all face. Gen Z employees are shocked by the depressing 9 to 5 work schedule. A 23-year-old college student pens an essay on the tiring expectations of a full-time job. And we're all of us who have, had to support our families and work hard all our lives are shaking our heads collectively. The Gen Z employee lamented in an essay published by Business Insider that her day job at YMCA is, while rewarding, still difficult since it takes up too much of her time, 9 to 5. I know people that would be happy if they only had to work 9 to 5. Um, so you can already see the mental divide that is affecting everything. Businesses that are trying to set up in these, say, downtowns can't get employees to come to work. Even if they take the position, they take it with an eye toward, if I find something better, I'm out of here, versus the long-term thinking that used to govern a lot of these decisions. So what I'm trying to point out is that the underpinnings of our decision making has changed. Just like the malls used to be a big thing in the 80s, the malls were huge. Malls are badly suffering today. So these all become changes in the economy and changes in the way work is done, that if companies don't adjust quickly enough, they become like that person that doesn't adjust to a downturn. They stumble and fall and sometimes don't get back up because they're stuck on a model. They're stuck on the yellow pages in an internet society. Let's just put it like that. They're going the way of the yellow pages, and they haven't picked it up yet fast enough. So as a result, they're disconnected from the people. And that doesn't mean that I think necessarily people have gotten so much lazier. I think they're poking holes in what we've always said was a system that sucked way too much time for what it gave you back. And I think, some people are just saying the quiet part out loud. So there's that. And here's a very sad story, and this is close to home here in Arizona, but I think this indicates just what we're talking about, a change in the mental state and the way in which people value life. A church leader is shot in the head while preaching here in Arizona. This was in Glendale. A very tragic story. A congregation is in shock after a beloved religious leader was shot in the head while preaching on a Glendale street corner on Wednesday night. And he is still, as far as I know, still alive, fighting for his life. Excuse me. And so I understand that they are trying desperately to keep him alive and recover him. And so please keep him in your prayers. That's a very sad state of affairs. This is straight persecution. This now puts the fear of the same thing happening into the minds and hearts of people across the nations. Are now going to be more concerned about sharing, and this is exactly what the enemy wanted, because you have to shut down evangelism. And there's too many people waking up. There's too many people asking hard questions. There's too many people grabbing their Bible. There's too many people calling upon the name of Yahuwah. There's too many people that are seeking first the kingdom and his righteousness. We've got to shut this down. And that is a knee-jerk demonic reaction. You know that that had to be demonic for someone to even think to do such a thing. And so I do believe that we have to be concerned, at least to the extent that we are wise as we're out and about, because our atmosphere is changing. And we're seeing warnings. When they warn in the public, it's also signaling. So sometimes it's a real warning, right? They really are warning about something. And other times it's a signal. So we have to kind of step back and watch and see. But we've been watching this fiasco on the southern border for some time in the United States. And this is not just the US that's got this challenge, this has been everywhere. Many countries are battling this and are now reevaluating how they handle the influx and movement of peoples, which makes some sense. And the FBI director says border gotaways a source of great concern for the agency, the same agency that had, you know, secret buses. So there is that. Ray testified at a House Homeland Security hearing. I don't believe anything this guy says. I'm sorry, but he's lost all credibility as far as I'm concerned personally. I think a very dangerous person to have in any form of power, who either is easily manipulated or is loose with the facts. And he said that the number of illegal immigrants evading Border Patrol agents and escaping into the country is a source of great concern. They're concerned for the agency, as he told lawmakers that threats from the other side of the border are consuming FBI field offices. I'm sorry, I just don't buy it. It seems like almost an intentional threat and putting people into a threat. I just found something out when they found out that a certain percentage, I don't know if this is true for everybody, but a certain percentage of the population do nervous purchases. And when they get fearful or they get anxious, they spend money. I didn't know that. I just learned that. It's a psychological effect that happens to a certain percentage of the population. So would it be shocking to find out that it's being utilized as an economic stimulus technique? No, wouldn't surprise me in the least. And so again, nothing surprises me at this point. We have learned so much as we've come through so many different things in these last few years. It's been amazing. So again, that's why we try to look at things that man really can't affect. For example, I don't know, maybe they have figured out how to affect volcanoes, but I'm thinking probably not. At least not. I haven't quite been convinced. I know I've seen certain people that say, they can shoot these things in and make these volcanoes. Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's quite possible or not. Maybe it is, but I do know one thing. Something shaking and rattling the earth because we got 19 volcanoes erupting at the same time. So that's interesting, right? So who's doing that and why? More than a dozen volcanoes are erupting at the same time worldwide. And this brings me back to Matthew 24, where he talks about earthquakes in diverse places. Well, you don't have volcanoes without earthquakes, right? And 3 new eruptions joined the list this week. The Smithsonian Institute Global Volcanism Program tracks new eruptions and updates its list currently erupting volcanoes on Wednesday. The most recent update shows 3 new eruptions, bringing the list total to 19 eruptions at once. And this list does not include all erupting volcanoes, but it does indicate that there's some definite increase of geoactivity in the earth. There's certainly more going on. So you have to wonder, what does that portend? Is that a foreshadow of destructive power? One thing about floods and hurricanes and tornadoes and fires, they reshape landscape and nobody's responsible. This has been going on for quite some time. Well, I can remember back in 1666, the Great Fire of London. Why, that reshaped the landscape quite a bit, but I digress. Right? You see, so that's why you got to always take a step back, because you never know what you're really watching with any of it, and you have to wait and see kind of how it unfolds. But I'll tell you this, I do believe we're in a time of judgment. And so our last story tonight leaves no doubt about it. And one of the topics and things that we're thinking about, many people are thinking about, is Exodus and getting out of Egypt, getting out of Babylon, as Revelation 18 says, come out of her, my people. And maybe you're one of those folks right now that are going, man, I tell you what, we need to bounce out of Babylon here. Things are not looking good. Well, then you're pretty wise if you're one of those people that have picked that up, because a lot of folks are taking too long to recognize the threat matrix. And there are indicators that are for even the dull of seeing and the dull of hearing. And when you see signs in the heavens, okay, like eclipses and blood moons, this is for like the dull of hearing and seeing. That's like for you. You need me to put this in the sky so you can say, oh, this time to go. Okay, right. Well, there's those signs that Elohim does that there's no other way to interpret them. You can't spin this any other way. There's no way to spin this. Okay. What happened to the Nile River in Egypt? And why is it blood red? Somebody want to explain this to me? Why is the Nile River turn blood red? Now, somebody wants to come scientifically explain. I'm not even going to look at their dumb explanation, because it doesn't matter why. It matters when. It matters that it happened and they were powerless to prevent it. Okay? And this is just being reported, folks. So this is new news. I know this has happened before, but this is now being reported again. And this is now a marker, in my opinion, and it's a sign out, it's a shout out to those who are wise, who are paying attention, like all of you folks on this channel, and those of you are friends and relatives of the awakened saints who are sharing content and saying, hey, did you know this? Did you know this was a fulfillment of Bible prophecy? Did you know he declared that he would turn rivers to blood? Did you know that this was part of the Exodus judgments that manifested in Moses's Exodus, and that he prophesied in the book of Jeremiah that the Exodus to come would dwarf the previous Exodus of Moses? It would be so great comparatively that we would no longer talk about the Exodus of Moshe because of the greatness of this Exodus to come. And so this is what this portends for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. My hope and prayer for all of you is that you are among those that have made a good repentance, who have not taken for granted the blood of Mashiach, who do not trample underfoot the grace of Almighty Elohim, but instead are using this time wisely to store up treasure in heaven, being found faithful with the limited time on the earth. You appear for a moment as a vapor. You are here for a snap second. And it is difficult as you look back on previous generations. It's easy for memory to be erased. It's easily for us. This generation can be erased very easily. All right. And so this is why I believe Elohim is causing us to slow it down and take a look, and maybe make some memorials, maybe slow down and say, hey, we were here and here's what we saw. And this is what happened. And the devil tried this. And then the remnant rose up and a horn blew and the plan got changed. And so thank you to all of you who are intercessors out there, who have laid your lives down in prayer, who have stood steadfast against the work of darkness. And we will know that Elohim is moving through you by the way in which you love one another. This is the fruit that he brings. And love lays his life down for his friend. Love behaves in a certain way, a bit reckless, actually. How many have felt reckless toward your brother, your sister, or a loved one, and you've had a reckless love for them when they called for your aid? And you knew that love was real because, boy, oh boy, look at that reaction, right? That emotion comes up and your heart gets pulled on. If you don't feel anything, something's wrong. How many know that if you're attached to the body, you should feel the pain of the body? You should also feel every form of elation. And I pray for every one of you that you are feeling joy in this hour as you see that we have been, in fact, victorious. Our prayers have been answered. The beast is coming down. Their systems are imploding. Their control matrix is failing, and light is coming from everywhere as he promised. He is destroying their power by the brightness of the King's coming. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate each and every one of you. And thank you for sharing the link. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. May Elohim bless each and every one of you. We'll be here next week, same time, same place. And we encourage you to join us for our weekend. We always have our Shabbat service, and then our gathering on Yom Rishon Sunday nights are always a blessing. Well, thank you again for joining us. May Elohim bless each and every one of you. Good night.